light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. One of the amusing phrases I created in response to unexpected things happening was that I sometimes now tell people that life is pitching curveballs again. Things we didn't expect, but using the metaphor of a baseball game, the ball comes at us in a way we didn't expect, and we have to swing differently in order to connect with the ball and hopefully hit a home run, if it were actually baseball. Metaphorically, how that translates into our lives is a very individual sort of interpretation. Unexpected things do come up, and it's easy to say one must persevere. But in that perseverance, if we don't come up with a way of trying things a little bit differently, of varying our approach, of shifting our method, then the outcome remains very much the same. Somebody suggested once that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing in the same way and expecting different results. The only time I have found that that isn't actually true is with my computer, curiously. That there are times where I do the same thing in the same way 3 and 4 times, and I really do get different results. And I don't know yet if it's because of power surges or dusty circuit boards or what it is, but I swear I do things exactly the same way and I get different results. In life, however, when you do things in the same way, there's not really any other reason to expect that things won't turn out exactly the same, unless you're really counting on some other variable in that particular sequence to somehow change. If you do the same things in the same way, but the weather is different, it might turn out differently. To the extent that you're able to adapt to the changing the weather, though, you can make choices about it instead of waiting for a happy accident, as one might say. When those unexpected curveballs come, though, when those unexpected turn of events, the challenge we didn't expect to be dealing with, the circumstance we expected to cooperate, but it didn't. In some cases, it is such a momentous event that it's devastating, it's catastrophic. May leave us without a way of continuing, at least continuing the way we thought we were going to. Not exactly catastrophic, but the first Christmas holiday special that I ever did, quite a number of years ago, I did all my homework ahead of time, found out how do I produce this effect, this is what you do with the equipment, this is, okay, I need this many people to manage all the equipment while this is happening. And I showed up in the studio and we did the equipment exactly as I'd been instructed, and the equipment didn't work as instructed. So suddenly I had all these people there. The special effect I was wanting to do wasn't going to happen. There was nothing for these people to do. Now they'd given up part of their day to be there. I felt some need to respond to their presence and I wanted them to feel loved and appreciated, even though the task for which they'd been requested to be present couldn't happen now because the equipment wasn't cooperating and there was no way for them to do what they'd been asked to do. Not because of their fault, but because the equipment wasn't doing what it should. So on the spur of the moment, I just said, everybody join me on the set. Let's have a holiday party just spontaneously right here on the set. And so I suddenly had 15 guests instead of 2 or 3. And at one point, when there was still extra time because things were progressing more quickly than we anticipated, and because we couldn't do those other special effects, I said, does anyone have Christmas memories to share? And we began passing the microphone all around the set. And people were coming up with stories and experiences and memories that I had no way of knowing were even available. But because I chose to take what could have been a disaster and see it as an opportunity, and to invite the unknown to be creatively constructive within that event, we wound up with a more wonderful show than I could have planned. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes I try shifting gears and doing something different, and it still falls flat. And sometimes I try it 4 or 5 times, And we may never find something that works and just have to say, well, this one really was a loss. Not because we didn't try, but because there wasn't anything else that could be done. In that moment, though, you kind of come face to face with this perhaps rhetorical but serious question of how do we maintain the strength to try? If it's when I give up trying that I find myself most vulnerable to becoming depressed for real reasons, but nevertheless becoming depressed. Some depression, depression is a very common word these days because a lot of people are dealing with it, a lot of people talking about it. Some people seem to think that we should never ever feel depressed at all, and if you feel depressed, we have a pill for that. If there's a chemical imbalance, and if the pill is somehow supposed to push that imbalance in a positive direction, it makes sense. This is what we need. I don't know that that's the case for everyone, though. Sometimes it's a negative environment that we need to remove ourselves from. Sometimes it's a negative event that we need to find some way to process. Sometimes it's feeling stuck and not having the strength to try. Well, the obvious question being, how do we regain the strength to try when we're feeling stuck? It's happened to a lot of small towns across the country, especially during these times when so many jobs have been outsourced to other countries, when corporations have decided that for the sake of profit, we will take advantage of the fact that there are different levels of economics in other countries, that $1 in this country won't buy much, but $1 in that country will buy a lot. And so if we pay a living wage in that country, it will be a whole lot less money than if we pay a living wage in this country. So we'll move all our production to that country. Those people will have a living wage. They will feel like they're prospering. They'll be producing goods for less than we can here. The thing we never figured out is what to do with the people here who no longer have employment available to them to make a living wage. They may be in a small town where there was only 1 or 2 or 3 employers, and suddenly there are too many people out of work and no place for them to live or any way to survive. It feels very stuck. How do we deal with that? Well, there are probably as many solutions as there are people. But the point is remembering to believe in those unknown possible solutions, and in each other to find the strength to persist in trying, and to persist in trying for as long as it takes to find the solution. And sometimes that can be a very long time. An individual may lose his job with a particular company, and even in large cities, it may take 1.5 years to find the next suitable position. The question being, do you have the resources to survive for 1.5 years? And one of those resources that you'll need is to continue to find the strength to try. That's where, of late, I keep saying sometimes our best resource is each other. The extent to which we love and support and be with each other and understand how debilitating discouragement and disappointment is, and how debilitating despair is. And yet in those moments, to be willing to reinvent ourselves. At a particularly severe juxtaposition in my own life, part of being willing to reinvent myself was being willing to let go of all sorts of things that I held dear and to move myself and my family 2,000 miles across the country to a totally new environment. And it takes a long time to restart your life in a new place. And so I'm having to be very, very patient with constructing new creative approaches and getting to know, learning new methods and learning new language, new ways of perceiving things, new ways of organizing things. And the curious but potentially helpful thing in that is that I'm coming into this environment with a totally fresh perspective, with a totally innocent way of looking at things, and I'm noticing things that aren't working, and if people are willing to listen, I can tell them what they're not seeing. And to the extent, similarly, that I'm willing to listen, they can tell me what I'm not seeing about them. That the reason their interpersonal relationships work in the way they do is because of certain assumptions or understandings that maybe they've never had to define before because they've all been doing it so long they don't realize they are doing it. In the world in which I grew up, a small Midwestern town, I sometimes joke in retrospect that the 11th commandment after the 10 commandments from the biblical text, the 11th commandment was that thou shalt be polite at all costs. But what not too many people there realized is that they were being polite to the extreme that they were compromising honesty. And from an autistic perspective, that I was unable to interpret duplicity. When people said things that they didn't mean or meant things they didn't say, I couldn't connect the two. And they didn't realize what they weren't saying. They didn't realize that the understanding was not in their words, it was in their mind. By having a discussion to where they could understand that, oh, I didn't say that, did I? Actually, nobody said that. Everyone understood it. Well, how did they understood it? Well, we grew up with it. Well, how did a child learn that that was the understanding? And in some cases, of course, the children didn't learn. But in most cases, they did, and that's why it became the social norm. There's a lot of things that need to be brought to a conscious level. And especially when life pitches curveballs, there are more things that need to be brought to a conscious level and need to be brought into open conversation. When somebody says, I need a place to live, instead of simply saying, if you don't have the money, you're homeless, to value that member of a community enough to say, we will find a way, and we will keep looking until we find a way for you to have food, clothing, and shelter, to have your needs met. When money becomes the measure of, well, and I've seen it again and again with so many groups, when money becomes the measure of what we are willing to do or not do, community is always the first thing to suffer. Human communities evolved from a basic family union where everybody cared about each other because they were family, not because they were paying their own way, not because they had the money, because they were family. As a family, the challenges to life, the challenges to existence were shared. And consequently, anybody who could do anything would do whatever they could do to support the ongoing family. And if it ever truly got to a point where there was nothing that an individual could do, usually it was due to age, sometimes due to other things, but frequently in tribal societies it would be pronounced, today is a good day to die, meaning that the elderly person had accepted their mortality, had contributed everything they could, and was now accepting that they had nothing more to contribute. And in a sort of mutual agreement, the family would recognize and respect that choice and create some sort of positive ritual of closure for their elderly family member and let them go to the life in back to the life in the spiritual world, I suppose we would say. To some extent, the family or the community could also say, this is something you can still do. You may not be able to join us in the field or work in the fields. You may not be able to take care of the children anymore. You can tell us the stories. You can carry our history for us. If they were also losing memory and losing the ability to communicate, they would have to find another task yet. But at some point when the whole community could not come up with any other task, any other way of this person supporting the ongoing community, there was an acceptance of the limitations of life. But it was only after all of the intellectual and creative resources of the whole family, of the whole tribe, of the whole community could not come up with any way of continuing that there would be an embrace and an acceptance of the finality of the situation. I recall seeing a documentary once of Eskimo tribes in the far north, that the whole tribe would embrace surviving or starving uniformly, and so that when they did find food, it was shared equally among the whole tribe, and the experience of one became the experience of all, because each individual was valued, and equally, not in a hierarchical sense, but equally, the survival of the tribe was valued. And I recall another presentation once of a hypothetical, obviously fictitious conversation between an Indian chief and a French fur trapper. Actually, I don't know if he was French or not. It was a fur trapper in the, I guess it would be the 18th or 19th century in North America. And the Indian chief was the one who made this very bold, profound statement that the time of the red man was passing and the time of the white man, the person to whom he was talking, was beginning to increase. And acknowledging that there have been different seasons and times, that even as autumn went into winter, that there was a time for people with autumn in their skin to fade, and people with winter in their skin to become predominant. And of course, that also raises, to follow that metaphor, every metaphor has a point at which it breaks down, but to follow that metaphor, there would be a time when those with winter in their skin would fade to those who had spring in their skin. Whether that is yellow or green, if there is such a thing as green people, maybe the Martians will be the next ones to live on Earth. Not to make light of it, but understanding that human history is a long, long, complicated narrative of one group of people replacing another at various intervals. And to acknowledge that with a certain grace and wisdom, to pass along whatever wisdom and gifts we can to whoever's coming next, and to realize when our time has come and it is time to let go, and to give thanks for all the memories we've created, all the memories we've shared, but time to let go. The thing I would not recommend, however, is when that curveball initially comes and we're dealing with the shock of it, because it has happened so abruptly and it's not at all what we expected. You know, be it a late spring snow or an early frost or something, a hurricane or a tornado, something out of the blue that shocks the landscape into this confused place of what do we do now? To look to each other in those moments. One of the fascinating things about humanity in those systems, and the reason I lean toward Gandhi's supposition that at heart humans are basically good, is that in those moments when the tornado hits, for a week or so, everybody remembers that all the categorizations don't matter. It's not a question of who's rich or poor or what race you are or what church you go to. Everybody helps everybody. In the agrarian environments in which I was raised, we still had some memory of that time before there were effective fire departments, that if a farmer's barn caught on fire, everybody would come running from all directions to help put out the fire. Essentially, the fire control was not outsourced to a volunteer fire department yet. It was shared among the people. We were the fire department. We were the social welfare agency. We were the person who would come to the rescue. It was. I grew up understanding that if anything went seriously wrong, we didn't wait and call the sheriff and sit on the porch and wait for him. We ran to the neighbors. Everybody depended on everybody, and it wasn't about whether you approved or even whether you agreed about farming methods or how you voted in the last election. It was the fact that a curveball, a catastrophe such as a barn fire or a sudden illness or an injury or an unexpected freakish snowstorm, all these different things would create a circumstance threatening everyone's survival, and it was important that we be there to be sure each other survived. And after that, we could go back to talking about methods and comparing beliefs and whatever, because that was lesser to the basic challenge of survival. Finding the strength to try was very much a question of looking within ourselves and being willing to do things in ways that they hadn't been done before. And being willing to introduce ourselves to someone maybe we'd never met before. Maybe we really didn't know the neighbor that well, but they were the neighbor, and their barn was on fire, or our barn was on fire, and somehow we had to be there for each other. It was understood. that if all the neighbors were gone, there wouldn't be anyone to call in our own time of need. And and every year there would be some serious accident, because farming involved lots and lots of machines, and all sorts of things could go wrong at any time. And somebody would have an accident and they wouldn't be able to take care of their farm for several months because of the period of healing that was required. Inevitably, somebody, no one ever knew who, would start organizing, and one morning 30 or 40 tractors would show up in the farmyard, and they would plow, disc, and plant the entire farm in one day. The entire farm. And the newspaper would come running to take a photo for the evening edition, showing all these tractors staggered across the field, all coming across, watching an entire field turned under by a plow in 15 or 20 minutes. What we can do working together is so much more than we can ever do on our own. And yet it is the ingenuity of each individual that allows the group to figure out what to do. Because as a group, if the more people you have in a room and say who has a good idea, the more people there are in the room, the less inclined anyone is to speak, because everyone thinks somebody else will. And which is where in some group dynamics it becomes important to break the deadlock, to break the silence by saying, what do you think, and what do you think, and what do you think? And by inviting specific individuals to speak, we begin to create ideas, and we begin to think like a town and become a community. One of the possible negative side effects of the way industrialized society became so oriented to factories is that everything would be dictated by the foreman. Well, if the foreman didn't know what to do, the factory workers would wait for a direction, and nothing would happen. Before that, when things were oriented to farms, everyone had to know what to do for themselves. We had to think for ourselves, and consequently, if this person wasn't doing it, everyone else knew how to immediately step in and fill the gap, to get things moving again. In a factory situation where the foreman knows or nobody knows, we have this huge community of people who have been encouraged not to think, not to be creative, not to contribute, not to suddenly step into the role of foreman unless they are officially promoted to that position. It has been a disempowering sort of dynamic, and in time of need, what is most necessary is for us to rediscover each other. When the factory closes and the town is there, that's the moment when, if we seize the opportunity, we can reintroduce ourselves to each other, and we can form a team to do a work that has never been done, or at least never been done in that way. And we can create our own research and development department, and once we have some ideas on the table contributed by, in some cases, the least likely individuals, then somebody else can step forward and say, well, I know how to take that idea and take it to the next level. I know how to take that idea and find a market for it. I know how to take that idea and make it even more efficient, so that we can do this and we won't need help from outside the town in order to survive. In some tribal situations in the past, instead of having individual houses for the winter, they would all move into one large house. And everybody would be in one enclosure with one perimeter against the cold. And the actual body heat of all the people inside would keep them warm throughout the winter. There are resources within ourselves and within each other that are so ready to be tapped for the challenges we face. But unless we look in the mirror, and unless we look in each other's eyes and begin to love the person looking back at us, no matter how much we don't understand them, those resources will remain untapped, and entire communities may die because they think there's no answer when it's right there in our hands the whole time. Thank you very much for watching. I encourage you to consider how your hands and your neighbor's hands and the stranger on the street's hands may hold secrets that will make all of your challenges turn and run and make us all winners. Thank you for watching.